Professor R. Radhakrishnan is Chancellor's Professor of English and Comparative Literature at the University of California, Irvine, and is considered as one of the leading post-colonial theorists and literary critics in the United States. He is also affiliated with African American Studies, Women's Studies, Critical Theory Emphasis, and core faculty of the PhD in Culture and Theory School of Humanities. He is also a noted translator and a poet in Tamil. Over to Professor.
Professor Radhakrishnan, according to you, what do you think are the key points that a writer needs to keep in mind while writing?
Yeah, thank you for the question and thank you for having me here. I'm enjoying this, appreciate it. It's a great question. I mean, first of all, a writer, you think of clarity, you think of lucidity. But it's not as easy as it sounds. It means for whom and from whom. So it is a dyadic, interpersonal, situation based on context. And there are many kinds of writing. So what succeeds in one context may not succeed in another. Lyrical writing, narrative writing, reportorial writing. The first thing I would suggest is to keep the notion of context alive and get a sense of who you are addressing. So is there a commonly shared knowledge base? So on the one hand, I think what a good writer does is be aware of the context, but at the same time not be